Welcome to the Arts and Technology Teach Out. We're in historic Hill Auditorium with Matthew VanBesien, President of the University Musical Society of the University of Michigan. Thank you for this great conversation.
Pleasure. It's great to be in this space. This is a very, very special and historic hall.
It certainly is, and every single one of us who's had the opportunity to be here in person remembers that first experience of being in this space.
I think it's not only a place where great artistry happens, but it's a space where great experiences happen for audience members, and you regularly hear from people who've been coming to concerts and performances for many, many years talk about the first time they heard Vladimir Horowitz here, or coming to see the Philadelphia Orchestra with Stokowski, and it's an incredibly important, special place for the university, but for the community at large.
And with that special environment, it's a special place to create art. I'm wondering, thinking in your experience about some of the tension of creating art in a space as special and intimate, or not intimate as this, in person, compared to the pressures to scale, to do things more in the digital space for a much larger audience than the audience here.
Yeah, I mean, there's a tension, and the tension has existed for a long time around recorded, captured, distributed music, especially live performances, versus the actual live experience itself. And I really try to I try to think of them as being, not mutually exclusive. They have a relationship to one another, and it's been proven now, I think, over many years that recorded music does not actually replace the live music experience, and yet recorded music is very interesting and important to artists, for sure, in terms of documenting their work, and also for all of us who are audience members to be able to capture and relive and re-experience on some level that live experience.
So it's interesting that you mentioned recorded music. We've been witnessing over the last week or two Apple standing down its iTunes product. And one of the interesting facts that came out of that is that in the last couple of years, more recorded music has been distributed in a physical medium than in a digital medium. Now, what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I want to say that there are people so much more fluent and knowledgeable about the recording industry than me. I've really been in the live performance business, throughout my whole career. But I've watched with great interest, and I think all of us who've worked in the performing arts, and especially in the musical field, have watched you almost get the feeling that it's somehow coming around full circle, although not necessarily coming back to exactly the same place. I mean, we all grew up with recorded music, and at that point it was vinyl, and we even talked about 8-track recordings for a while, for a little bit of a laugh. But we all remember the advent of the compact disc and digital recording, and then moving into streaming. And it was always fascinating to me, and I think for most people, that it wasn't actually the traditional recording industry companies, record companies, if you will, who figured out the distribution of digital music on the web. It was actually Apple and other related companies who really figured out how to think about that medium. And then now you're seeing, this kind of return to not just physical delivery of music, but vinyl. I would be curious to get inside those numbers and understand how much of that physical product is compact discs now versus actual vinyl recordings, and there's a whole now burgeoning industry. For a while it was a bit of a novelty thing, but now there actually is really a movement towards the return to this analog medium that we had before.
And thinking about that, one of the themes that you create here is that technology has always been a part of the creation. But I wonder, as somebody in the middle of making those experiences for all of us, when do you start considering technology as part of the process, and how do you do so?
I think, the thing that I always say is it's important to, especially nowadays, and especially with younger audiences, because they've grown up with technology in a vastly different way than even we have. It can't be just an overlay. It can't be, let's do the purest sort of performance environment or creation of work, and then figure out how to retrofit technology onto that or into that. We really need to see that technology is a part of all of our lives now, and there's no getting around that now. It's here, and it's here to stay. And so that technology, you have to be thinking of it from the very beginning. I'm still in the live performance business, and we start with artistry performing live, but we're seeing more and more artists coming to us from the very beginning, whether it's an artist like Simon McBurney or a young theater maker from the UK, Javad Alipur, who's using the dark web and social media and the internet as a whole premise for a theatrical work. You're seeing artists embrace technology not as something that is dropped onto it after the fact, but actually as something that's part and parcel to the creative process and to the work itself.
Thinking ahead about where you see technology influencing your work, changing your work, challenging your work in the arts, where do you see that going from here?
I may have a slightly different view than a lot of people. I think the strength in digital technology and the use of the internet for performing arts companies is much less about transmitting full performances. And I realize that this flies in the face of really phenomenons like the Metropolitan Live in HD series and the Berlin Philharmonic's Digital Concert Hall. And yet, I think that most performing arts companies and artists can use digital technology to provide a level of insight either before or after performance, a way to go deeper, to provide a platform to have an audience understand the creative process for a work, the origins creatively for the work around the content itself, and to have further opportunities to engage around work as an overall enhancement, less so about the actual transmission, because I still believe, and maybe it's because it's convenient for me to believe it, but I really do believe that fundamentally the live human experience in a place, it doesn't necessarily have to be a grand concert hall like this, but in a space with other human beings experiencing art is something that's very, very fundamental to who we are as a society and who we are as human beings and how we experience creativity and artistry.
Is there a way that people who are experiencing the art digitally can create an experience as rich, even if it's different?
Without question. I mean, I think that's the other side of the coin that I would say. Even though I feel very strongly about the live performance, there's no question that digital technology has made so many more things available to so many more people around the world. And I think about my own upbringing in really quite small rural locations. I wanted to be a musician, and so I remember going to a bigger city and going to a sheet music store because that was the moment at which I could actually gain access to this music that I couldn't get. You could maybe do it mail order, but you certainly couldn't get online and order it or even download like you can today. So it's an enormous advantage for people from all backgrounds and all over the world just to have access to the art, to performances, to historic performances, to performances of today, and all the materials and sources around it, whether it's a libretto or whether it's a script or whether it's the original. When we were in New York, we digitized all the scores of Leonard Bernstein that you can go through page by page. And that, to be able to have someone in New Zealand be able to look at the scores of Leonard Bernstein without flying to New York is a pretty amazing thing. So there's no question that overall on a net basis, technology, it brings us much more close together, and ultimately it helps many more people experience the arts in a variety of ways.
And I observe in what you have to say that some things we think of as technologies at one point no longer become technologies. That sheet music was a technology at one point.
Yeah, there's a phenomenon right now where musicians are starting to use, an iPad versus physical music, and it's amazing to me that it still causes a stir, like for an audience, that the audience will be captivated as much by the fact that they're using an iPad versus a physical score. And think about it, for pianists and conductors, this is incredibly useful. They're not having to necessarily lug around 50, 60 pounds worth of scores when they travel nationally and internationally. But there really has to be a growing sort of comfort and embrace of technology, not at the expense of the arts. And I think that was, for many people, generationally and otherwise, have felt that somehow technology was going to subsume artistic experiences, audience experiences, and I just don't feel that that's the case. And I know here at UMS, we're really, really committed to thinking about technology in a kind of ever-expansive ways as a way for our audiences to experience these moments more, but also to really enable artists to create works in a way that they might not have seemed, dreamt that were possible 20 years ago.
Well, thank you for your thoughts today.
Sure.
We've really appreciated what you've had to observe about all of these topics.
It's my pleasure.
And thank you for joining us, and we look forward to continuing the conversation with you.